Okay.
Okay, good.
All right. Okay, so a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for joining. And good morning and good evening, as per the chronotopic existence of all of us, because some of us are in India and not all of us are. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. And I am Shampriti Bhattacharya, and I will be conducting this webinar. So before introducing our keynote speakers and our and the convener, I will give a very brief outline of today's topic. I hope that we all are aware of the fact that we are celebrating the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo, the yogi, the literary critic, the poet, the scholar, the seer, the whatnot, and also historical speaking, the prophet of Indian nationalism. And this webinar will therefore kind of commemorate this auspicious event. And what is more interesting is that for the title itself, from the title of the webinar itself, you can imagine that it is kind of breaching the literary world of Russia and India, because we have the literary, philosophical, and critical world of Russia with the figures like Mikhail, Bakhtin, and Dostoevsky, and we have Tolstoy, we have Turgenev, and here we have from India the sage, the Maharishi, the Rishi, Aurobindo, Sri Aurobindo, I'm sorry. So let's start creating this all-inclusive world of poetic consciousness. And now that I have given a very brief overview, I try to give a brief overview of the topic. Now let me introduce the backbones of today's session. First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Kanchan Ghosh, for convening this webinar. And then we have our, among us, Professor Lakshmi Banlamudi. She is the professor of psychology, City University of New York. And she is the author of Dialogics of Self, the Mahabharata and Culture, the History of Understanding of History. The history of understanding of history. Is it?
History of understanding and understanding of history.
An understanding of history. I'm so sorry, ma'am. There was some
That's okay.
editing here. Yeah, and numerous other works, and which are primarily focusing on dialogic consciousness. And she is also a connoisseur of trekking and classical music and Carnatic music, which is South Indian music. And her spiritual journey to Mount Kailash was recorded in the book Movements with the Cosmic Dancer on Pilgrimage to Kailash, to Manasarovar. Once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for being with us today. And now I'm introducing Professor Mikhail Kumar, who is presently working as Professor of English in the Veer Kunwar Singh University, Ara, Bihar. He is the author of two books entitled Sri Aurobindo's Yogic Consciousness and Poetry. And in the perspective of Sri Aurobindo, a study of scientific developments and contemporary literary theory. He has published numerous research papers on Sri Aurobindo in the journals of Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Pondicherry, and foreign journals. He is likely to publish a new book entitled Modern Physics Towards Sri Aurobindo, which sounds very interesting. And now that I have given a brief overview, so just a little housekeeping before we get started. If any of you have any question, just type the questions in the comment section in the Zoom chat box so that we can get back to you after the session. And now, without further ado, we will dive right into the session. But before that, I would like to uttered Mother's prayer, one of Mother's prayers. For the plenitude of thy light, we invoke thee, O Lord. Awaken in us the power to express thee. All is mute in the being as in a desert crypt. But in the heart of the shadow, in the bosom of the silence burns the lamp that can never be extinguished. The fire of an ardent aspiration to know thee and totally to live thee. The nights follow the days. New dawns unweariedly succeed to past dawns. But always there mounts the scented flame that no storm wind can force to vacillate. Higher it climbs and higher, and one day attains the vault still closed. The last obstacle opposing our union. And so pure, so erect, so proud is the flame that suddenly the obstacle is dissolved. Then thou appearest in all thy splendor, in the dazzling force of thy infinite glory. At thy contact, the flame changes into a column of light that chases the shadows away forever. And the word leaps forth, a supreme revelation. Now, let's start. We will dive right into the session. I will turn the time over to our first speaker, Professor Lakshmi Bandlamudi, who will be talking speaking on the topic, laughter, God's stamp and seal on the Siddhi of Samatha. Welcome again, ma'am. Thank you so much for being with us, and over to you.
Thank you so very much. For some reason, I thought Professor Nikhil Kumar was going to go first, according to never mind, I don't have a problem. Professor, do you want to go first, or is it okay if I do?
No, you please first.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just that sequence, that's what I had anticipated, but never mind. So sort of as a continuation of what Sampriti, the prayer of Mother that she just recited so beautifully here, I want to begin, since we are honoring Sri Aurobindo, and the topic and the title itself I have taken from the words of Sri Aurobindo. So the topic that I'm going to talk about is laughter. Laughter is a very highest kind of evolution. It's the closest companion of truth. So what Sri Aurobindo, first I'll talk about Sri Aurobindo. I'll at least set the stage by, in this Sapta Chatushtaya, Sri Aurobindo says, Samata Shantihi Sukham Hasyam. Okay. So samatha is equanimity, so he's sort of setting the stage, the very shlok itself. And he identifies two types of equanimity. One is very passive and the other is active equanimity, right? The passive ones he's talking about titiksha, meaning calm reception, so it is just simply opening yourself to receptivity. And udasinata, so it means indifference to dualities. So laughter is the one that actually gets to the pinnacle of Advaita philosophy. Yeah. So that's why it is very critical. And I'll compare it with what Bakhtin talks about in his famous work, Rabelais and, in his world. And then there is the nati, which is submission of soul to the God. So those are all passive forms of equanimity that Sri Aurobindo is explaining. And the other is the active part. And the active part is rasa, rasanubhuti, appreciative, right? All these emotions, aestheticized emotions, are in our previous discussions. I had spoken quite a bit about art and answerability of of Mikhail Bakhtin. When you look at the collection of Bakhtin's works, I argue that the aesthetic vision that art and answerability is sort of addressing, it has this sort of a refinement and literary kind of a flourish. All those things are and there is a separation and individuation. But as you know, the dialogic world will not be complete without this carnivalesque, which is based upon, this attahasa that I will be talking about. I'll even talk about Abhinav Gupta, which is, I think, much closer to Sri Aurobindo, or rather, Sri Aurobindo was closer in the spirit, although he is not discussed in great detail. So the other is Pritu, Pritir, the active part of equanimity, and that is the pleasure of the mind. And lastly, the most important one is Ananda. So the duality ceases. So there is a complete kind of a, so we'll try to talk, oh, there is somebody coming in. So we will try to see the converging and diverging points between this Russian thinker and Sri Aurobindo on this topic. So Shanti, right? For that matter, Shanti is not possible without upholding Dharma. So from my work on Mahabharata, I will make that claim, because only when Dharma is restored, there can be peace. Otherwise, everything else is very artificial. So Sri Aurobindo makes that very clear. So without the justice, there cannot be any peace. So Shanti, only when equanimity is achieved, it is not an artificial kind of an equanimity, just a declarative statement, all of us are equal, and, it's a kind of a false peace, it only maintains the veneer, but there cannot be any change and transformation of consciousness. So that is what is really very critical that Sri Aurobindo talks about. So only then there can be Shanti in the system, and that Shanti can give us Sukham. So Sukham, when you're talking about, is a complete relief and release from dukkha, right? So here is the sort of what Sri Aurobindo says. Hasyam is an active side of Sukham. So it is not a passive thing. It is a very active thing. When you look at Hasyam, you get it. It is the bulb lights up in the mind, and therefore it's enlightenment. It is a sign, a symbol of enlightenment, because you're not seeking any explanation. You're responding to the laughter. You're responding to the joke, to the words with the sideward glance. So that is why it is. You need a. In fact, right now I'm currently working on a book. Tentatively titled as Language, Reality, and Laughter. So and I'm setting up dialogues between Bhartrhari, the Sanskrit grammarian, Mikhail Bakhtin, and Abhinav Gupta, because Abhinav Gupta has one of the finest philosophies, not only on laughter, aesthetics, and many important aspect of performing arts. So Hasyam is a very active side of Sukham. It is not some cheap amusement. Laughter is not sort of trivial. Laughter must be very, very revealing. So the premise of the book that I'm working on is all of reality is constituted in language, right? But certain aspects of reality are accessible only to laughter. And that's why laughter, the carnivalesque genre, the comedy, satire, is so critical in literature. Because it reveals something and it catalyzes something, and it reveals something that is otherwise hidden in that semiotic sphere. That it. right? By the way, folks, I would like to keep it kind of informal. If people want to jump in and ask a question, do raise your hand, because I don't want to be just delivering a lecture, So I know there will be time towards the end, but nevertheless. So what Sri Aurobindo writes is, Hasyam is the active side of Sukham, right? It consists in an active internal state of gladness. So what is critical is internal freedom and access to interior truth. So there is a reason that Sri Aurobindo is talking about that the internal state of gladness and cheer, it is not just a facade that we sort of engage in, but rather deep down. That is why it is an active kind of a sukham. That can happen only when you are in touch with the interior truth. And interior truth, we can say Brahman, the supramental, any number of things, the phraseology that Sri Aurobindo uses. I'm sure Professor Nikhil Kumar will address that. So gladness and cheerful, which no adverse experience. This is the very critical thing that, Sri Aurobindo uses the words so carefully. It is such a brilliant kind of an architecture of ideas that are being expounded, because in every utterance of Sri Aurobindo, you will find that the reason he chooses the words that he chooses and how he strings the words, all those things are incredibly, okay, just one second, somebody is, are incredibly powerful, and it has a deep-rooted philosophical meaning. So no adverse, that's why kuch chinta nahi, there is no agony, there is no anguish in that state of bliss. So mental or physical can travel. It is perfection in God's stamp and seal. That is the important thing. That's why I picked up this, phrase from Sri Aurobindo. Its perfection is God's stamp and seal on the siddhi of samatha. So why is it? See, when I'll later on talk about how even in our carnivalist traditions, and I think India has more so than France and other medieval Christianity or medieval Europe. I think India has had a very rich tradition of carnival. And why is that so? So carnival, or the last day, the procession, always happens after 10 days of yagam and yajnam and other rituals, right? And after that, God comes to the streets. So he belongs to the streets. He's removed from the sanctum sanctorum and he's wandering in the streets. So we will see where that samatha is actually being finds its manifestation, how that is being embodied in these rituals. So it is an internal image of the smile of Sri Krishna, Sri Aurobindo says. Balavat, the childlikeness, not childishness. When you laugh at somebody, you're being very childish. When you laugh with everyone, you are being childlike. So it is a sort of most primal kind of a response. A baby, even before they acquire language, they start smiling. Smiling is one of the things that we are, through the evolution, we are equipped with in order to bond with fellow human beings. That's why when the baby smiles, we scoop the baby, we hug them, and that's how the attachment. So how do we, this biological organism, turn into a social being, right? It is through that smile. That's why laughter is part and parcel of that carnivalesque. So, so I'll talk about both the psychological, the literary, and the philosophical aspect of laughter. So it says, as the eternal Balaka and Kumara in the garden of the world. So that is how Sri Aurobindo explains the, Hasya. Why is it a sort of a seal and stamp, or God's stamp and seal on the siddhi of samatha, because this is an achieved thing. It is not, just simply a biological smile is something that we are endowed with. But a kind of smile that we evolve and then engage in that kind of laughter, a carnivalesque laughter, or something like what Lord Shiva embodies or is referred to, and that is attahasa. Shiva is called as attahasa. So boisterous laughter, right? It is not just simply the smile of Krishna, but really very loud, boisterous laughter. That is So now I'll go to a bit of Sri Abhinav Gupta. So this okay, Sampriti, are you here? Okay. Abhinav Gupta, in his commentary on Natya Shastra, so the way he explains it is about laughter is kuhakam kakshagrivaadi sparshanam. Kuhakam kakshagrivaadi sparshanam. It is like the tickling of the armpits, he says. So it is a very tactile kind of a metaphor that he's talking about in order to explain how, when you say tickling, it is a form of acute aggression, is it not? You want to evade the aggression. Think about a child. You go tickle the child. The child wants to run away. But when you stop the tickling, they still want more. So it is acute, affectionate aggression. So that the ambiguity is maintained when so even whether it is in our Vedanta or Abhinav Gupta, they all talk about at the heights of consciousness, the polarities just simply coexist. They don't just synthesize in a Hegelian way, nor is it that they are reconciled, but they remain irreconcilable. And so laughter is the kind of liberating aspect. We know that things cannot synthesize, they cannot merge. And it is that non-merger that, then we are recognizing the ultimate truth. And therefore, we respond to it with a laughter, attahas. One of the great, I think, most very highly evolved people are the ones who are capable of that kind of childlike laughter. Think about Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa. He, more than anyone in his actions, he is the one who really reveals that childlike laughter. So when you read Kathamrit and everything, you say, oh my goodness, this is, that innocence, kind of purity of that laughter. He is not so when you realize that you don't know enough, then laughter is the only kind of response. So kuhakam kakshagrivaadi sparshanam. It is like, so when in literature, I think many of you probably are literature students, so that's why I want to kind of touch. In literature, when you have that carnivalesque genre, right, it touches upon the truth. It catalyzes truth. It is sort of hinting, you can't be asking for the laughter is not grounded on dictionary meanings. Would you all agree, right? You can't be referring to a dictionary, you have to understand the context. It is very, very earthbound, right? Because you're basically understanding the ground realities. Long ago, I used to appreciate, when I was in India, appreciated the British humor. And 40 years of my life in America, now when I listen to some British humor, I'm like, oh, what exactly are they saying? Or you will find it in family gatherings, generational differences. If I start reminiscing with a cousin or a family member about God knows what happened 40 years back, and we are laughing like crazy, the kids are asking us, what exactly is so funny about this? Because they don't understand the context and they don't understand the actual ground realities or that particular. So it is very much subjected to that spatio-temporal upheavals. Time and space, chronotope. That's what Bakhtin talks about. So this is this tactile metaphor that Abhinav Gupta is talking about is really a form of tickling, tickling of the semiosphere and awaken. It is almost like he calls it as like a mental kind of an awakening, so you feel awakened, you feel that you have not just discovered, you have grasped the reality, right? The truth is something that you're able to gain access to. Since I'm so technologically, I thought I should show you a photograph, but never mind, because I'm not able to access the desktop and I just don't know how, but it's okay. I think we can. So what do we mean by carnivalization of consciousness? See, as I said, laughter is a sort of a very heightened awareness. It is not some cheap amusement. So it has incredible philosophical dimensions, for both Abhinav Gupta and perhaps even Sri Aurobindo. It is that internal freedom, right? So it has that liberating potential. Abhinav Gupta writes about it in terms of swatantriya. You have discovered Shiva. That is the ultimate kind of swatantriya. So at the root of all this, in any kind of an aesthetic vision, is that swatantriya. You're able to see, when gods are kind of in a procession in the streets, the god now belongs to everybody. A beggar or a raja or an aristocrat, who cares? Everything, that is the samatha, because you are completely dissolving in the crowd. And this has again, incredible. So it has a liberating potential. What does it liberate you? It does not liberate you from the world, but it liberates you in the world. You're very earthbound, you can look at the gods and say, I can laugh here. Earth, I don't need to go to Indralok, in order to rejoice. I can be where I am and still find the delight, right, of the earthly life. It makes the earthly life bearable, so to speak, right? So is it a mockery? Is it a rebellion? Is it a revelation? All of them, because the conventions are there for a certain purpose. But when conventions reach a certain feverish pitch, they turn into hypocrisy. That doesn't mean that we erase the conventions. So whether it is in the Shakespearean text or whether it is in ancient Sanskrit, text, there is always the wise fool. The wise fool is very critical. The wise fool is that he knows that he's a fool. So the wise fool, according to Abhinav Gupta, has a dvijihva, that it's a forked tongue. So with that forked tongue, he plays. There is a kind of a semantic play that he engages in very freely. And therefore, what happens is that language is packed with ambiguities. As I said, it is like the cute aggression. You want to evade it, but you also desire it. Right? That ambiguity is maintained in that attahasa. Shiva laughs. That's why his first father-in-law, Daksh, could not handle him, because he thought he was so uncouth, because Daksha was very critical, he wanted to lay out the conventions and the code of conduct and everything. But Shiva did not abide by that, right? And actually the lord of comedy, according to the Natya Shastra, is Ganesha. Vakratunda Mahakaya. You know, he has these. I'm so sorry. I don't know who this is. I can't speak to you. I'm on. Never mind. I can't. Sorry about that. This is one of the problems of. Okay. I forgive. Pardon me for that. So it is not mockery when we are engaging in the laughter. It is a sort of form of a rebellion, a revelation, right? It is a very targeted kind of a rebellion. It is not just because I'm a rebel without a cause and I just take to the streets and start screaming, none of all that. It is extremely focused. It's almost has a laser kind of a beam where you are trying to, so you're not trying to demolish, you know, the wise fool is not interested in demolishing any conventions. And so was Shiva, was not interested in demolishing anything. What they want to do is because the reason that as a Pramata Gana, right, as the principal attendant of the God's kingdom, Ganesha is the first Vidushak, Vakratunda, right? You know, he's a so, but the one with the Vakratunda is the Lord of perfection. And he is the one who sanctions even Makali, the boon of laughter, you know, necrophilic kind of laughter. So basically, it is a kind of a heuristic device in order to peel layers of hypocrisy. You know, that's what laughter is. So it is very much a serious business. And all dialogic, open-ended democratic societies must have the ability to question all authorities. But that questioning the authority is not just because I have nothing better to do and I don't know what to do with myself and just so create a racket in the streets. But it is really to achieve a certain specific kind of goals. So, you know, in fact, when you look at modern day literature, that is where I think earlier, Sampriti, you said you like Bibhiti Bhushan, and you know, those great literary writers. Even I'm from South, I'm a huge fan of Bhairappa. When you look at all these ancient Sanskrit literature, you will see that there is no division between comedy and tragedy. In fact, Bakhtin bemoans the loss of that in modern day literature. Laughter has become absolutely, you know, even old films, right? I like Mera Naam Joker. You know, it is so deeply philosophical, actually, and it took some time for that to be recognized. You know, it was not an immediate hit in the, you know, in theaters, but eventually people picked that up. You know what, Kshemendra, another satirist from Kashmir, actually one has to acknowledge that Kashmir was the site of all learning, you know, in ancient India. The reason being that so many thinkers, I mean, Kashmir to Saraswati, we say. So Ma Saraswati is there, you know, that land. And all these great thinkers, they worked out. In fact, although my specialty is Bakhtin, and it was really from Bakhtin I came towards India, you know, Indian philosophy, and suddenly the India came back to me, still living in America, and and that's what sort of guided me to work on Mahabharata, about the dialogicality. So long before this pluralism and dialogue and everything became very fashionable in the Western world, I think India had figured it out. And in that open-ended dialogic system, one of the most, that's okay. One of the most important feature of dialogic world is the ability to laugh. Laughter is a carnival is a kind of a corrective measure, you know, when things reach its peak, and then you know, so because sanctity, when it becomes sanctimoniousness, how do you correct it? You know, we need to correct it through laughter. Right. So, you know, Kshemendra says in his Desopadesa, you know, worldly lesson, my labor is in no way meant for those who are tainted even slightly by the symptoms of disease, which is the conceit of sanctimoniousness. So, someone shamed by laughter will not persist in his wrongs. I feel, and we could open this up for discussion later on, I feel that today we have arrived at a time the person cannot even be shamed. You know, psychologically, shame is a very primitive emotion. You know, so the child first emotion that the child in its growing up, before they reach guilt and other sophisticated emotion, is the shame. So shame is a very primitive emotion. If you're that shameless, all bets are off. You're not going to move to a much higher level at all. You know, so that's why I think laughter and satire is not as stinging as it ought to be, right? You know, and that is sort of very critical. So, you know, Bakhtin, I'll now read a passage from Bakhtin. And this is from Problems of Dostoevsky's Poetics. Kanchan had asked for talking about, you know, the greatness of Dostoevsky or, you know, Tagore. They knew how to work with laughter. They knew how to insert that as a catalyst. You know, to move the story, they knew how to handle it. So it's not surprising that Sri Aurobindo also talks about this laughter as a God's stamp on samatha, you know, siddhi of samatha. You know, that's very critical. Carnivalesque laughter likewise is directed towards something higher, towards a shift of authorities and truth, a shift of world orders. Laughter embraces both poles of change. It deals with the very process of change. With the, you know, we have to understand laughter or even grotesque body images. These are all inevitable aspects of a birth process. They are inevitable aspects of birth process. When you look at, you know, and I think Ma Kali embodies that. So she's always there, you know, with her necrophilic laughter in the Smashan, and you know, garland of skulls and everything. She is that. So people have that's what Sri Ramakrishna. You know, these were things that I thank God I took a printout rather than. So you know, so grotesque body is cosmic and universal. Translates into biological. You know, it removes all fear from death. We don't think of, although Mother Kali is dancing in the Smashan, death has no terrifying overtones. Right, that is something. So it is an extraordinary capacity for and for a symbolic generalization, meaning she is the link between death and life, new life. And that process is accompanied, you know, the new birth of anything new, quite literally in a very physical manner, is accompanied by bodily fluids and stench and squalor and dirt and everything else. But that is inevitable. And that is the reason that laughter has a very critical, you know, role. I think somebody is need to mute themselves. Nikhilji, can you mute? I'm going to mute. Okay. Okay. Because I think there is background noise. Or is it Kanchan? No, right? Okay, that's good. Because otherwise there is a certain... combined in the act of carnival laughter are death and rebirth. right? So that is why I refer to Mother Kali, because she is that link between death and rebirth. But that's why she always has a bloated tummy, and there is a sort of, everything seems grotesque, but that grotesque body is cosmic and universal. The ancients knew how to use the bodily topography to talk about other metaphysical issues of the cosmos. And so laughter is a very critical aspect of that. Right? So that's why, laughter does not just simply, it's not a diversion. It is not an escape route from the reality. It takes you away and brings you back to reality in a much more cleansed form, so to speak. So what Bakhtin says in his Rabelais is, laughter showed the world anew in its gayest and the most sober aspects. Its external privileges are intimately linked with interior forces. You'll see the parallels, the one that I read from Sri Aurobindo and what I'm reading from Bakhtin. It's very interesting. I was doing research at Banaras Hindu University, and I was talking with Professor Kamlesh Datta Tripathi, and fortunately, he has read. So, I think I kind of introduced long ago to Bakhtin, and he had already read it. And he just said, Bakhtin must have been an old Indian sage, just simply reborn in Russia. That was his, characterization. So linked with interior forces, their recognition of the rights of those forces. So that is really very critical. But moving into the what shall I say? There are so many aspects of laughter, and just a brief kind of a contrast between Freud and Bakhtin. For Freud, laughter is an individual affair, whereas for Bakhtin, it's a collective. It's very contagious. Just as how melancholy and depression is contagious, laughter is also contagious. So that's why we say the yoga of laughter, and we laugh heartily. There are certain neurotransmitters that are released in the mind, and it is a dopamine is serotonin. There is a good flow of it, and therefore we feel happy. We feel joyous. We don't feel sluggish, right? For Freud, the location of it is in the mysterious zone of unconscious realm, whereas Bakhtin says it is open and visible in this space of carnival. So there is no such thing as like a secret. When you read Freud in his famous book on jokes, he connects it to unfulfilled or unrealized aggression and sexual fantasies and other kinds of really very dark side of it. Whereas the theoretical interpretation that Bakhtin gives is very different. He just, for Freud, it is forbidden and sinful desires in a disguised form that leads to laughter. Whereas Bakhtin says, no, it is like peeling the layers of hypocrisy. Like all these like comedians, Vidushak, they put on so many masks, layers of masking on the face. You put the layers of masking only to reveal, to peel the layers of masking that psychologically, they put on to cover up. So it bears the, naked truth, in all its true form. So laughter veils, and for Freud, it is a cover for undesirable truths. And when you read his books, it's always kind of a very anti-Semitic. It's really very pathological. Whereas when you read Bakhtin's Rabelais, you will see that, my God, everything is just simply, truth in all its naked form is revealed. So hypocrisies of the society are revealed, exposed in in laughter, or the carnival, So laughter is all inclusive in Bakhtin's. So it is not an exclusive. Only when you laugh at someone and you're deriving pleasure in mocking at other, then you have no business to laugh at somebody's ailment. But if they are laughing and they invite you to join that, I've done this with some of my friends, unfortunately, they're suffering from, when they were suffering from cancer, and they're shopping for wigs or something. Suddenly it becomes, it's so revealing how absurd. We don't even know the duration of life, and we are concerned about beauty and wigs and other things. So the only choice that is available is to laugh. So when that person is laughing at their own absurdities of life, right, then laughter is permissible. But you cannot laugh at somebody who is suffering from cancer or any other terminal illness. That is mockery. So we need to make a distinction, because Bakhtin says this very clearly, that laughter is the least understood emotion. Laughter and satire and all these things are least understood because we don't know how to handle it. We don't know how to theorize it. Right? So every act of world history was accompanied by laughing chorus. So that is very critical, right? Because it is the heightened, all inclusive, the lower stratum of the body and the upper stratum of the body, the mind and the body and the cosmos, everything gets integrated and absorbed into that heightened consciousness. But not every period of history had Rabelais for corypheus. So he was not the leader of the marching band because we don't know how to handle laughter. Another very important thing about, and the other thing, what Freud does not show any developmental potential for laughter, whereas Bakhtin says this is the ultimate catalyst for development. So I would say to, link it with Sri Aurobindo, who would say that, listen, if this is the God's seal and stamp on that samatha, that requires a lot of effort, and it is a kind of tapasya, it is a kind of constant evolution. And that evolution, another very sort of psychological dimension of this is, for all our identity formation, separation and individuation is very critical, right? I am unique. I am, that separation from everyone, including our parents and everything, because that is how you're affixing your signature, right? But that I-ness, right? Think about the kind of a spiritual dimension to that. That I-ness, which is important, right, in the vital life, that can become a barrier for our growth, right? So that I-ness has to be relinquished. So when you dissolve into that carnival crowd, right, think about the procession, God's procession, and you are just simply not uttering your own prayers. You are just simply your individual voice, your individual identity. Everything is relinquished and it is dissolved into but you cannot completely all the time be in that dissolution. You can't participate. Carnival is only for a specific time and place, right? So in order to, periodically we need to take a day. Every day we cannot be having a satire. It was only at a certain specific time and place, then you say, and you absorb everything. If you have read the famous book by Tamil writer Perumal Murugan, he wrote a book called Half Woman, it's an Ardhanarish. So he also talks about the story in the temple, under normal circumstances, it happens for 10 days. And the last day, all rules are relaxed. So if a woman is suffering from infertility, she can step out of the marriage and have sex with somebody, because it is seen as a gift from God anyway. So it is only on that day things become permissible. So the ancient traditions, before we had these sperm donation and egg donation and surrogacy and other wonderful modern day things, right from Mahabharata, that was the whole thing, right? Even Kunti herself had to beget children from other gods. So this was something that was, so there are rules, but there are exceptions to the rules. And unless you have the exception to the rules become extremely exploitative and hegemonic and, ruthless. And as a corrective measure to that, before it slips into that sanctimoniousness and hypocrisy, in order to retain that piety. Okay, I get carried away. What is the time frame? Are we okay? I'm just going to read the last
Yes, ma'am.
paragraph.
It is 9 p.m. in India, so it should be 11 a.m., 11:30 a.m. probably.
Yes, no, that's fine. It's just, do I have a few more minutes? A minute?
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, it's just that there are many things, and it's easy to get carried away. We must listen to Professor Nikhil Kumar too. So I shall sort of conclude with, before I do that, I just want to talk about, so it is an laughter and carnival is a form of iconoclastic wisdom. You are not following the conventional forms of reverence and other things, but it is a different, iconoclastic. So you drop all pretensions of uniqueness and superiority. That is the samatha, right? Okay, I am part and parcel of this human race, and I don't need to establish my or individual opinion and individual identity, that I just simply periodically kind of relinquish that. So what in spiritual traditions we call it as sattva guna, right? You try to overcome that vital energy which can go haywire. So you need to kind of calm it down. So the it basically exposes the imposter in all of us. We're all, with the stage, the world is a grand stage, and we're all actors on the stage. And at some point, you have to kind of stop being an actor. So it captures both the panoramic and the close-up shot of reality. Right. So satirical language is very salty. It has even profanities and curses. It is like the street language. Carnival is also carnival feast, food, and you're not royalty, but you eat like a royal in a carnival, right? Because even the emperor is decoronated, and the beggar or the scoundrel is coronated. So it is the buffoon, and it is ruled by the buffoons. And so it's both faithful to the universal and local. And it is a way of seeking collective justice. So we are not fighting for individual rights. We are fighting in a carnivalesque mode. We are, that's why when you look at, actually, there's a wonderful book that it's a very readable. It's called Fools Are Everywhere. So by the author tries to look into various traditions. When the civilizations were very open, the emperors always had a zester, a court zester. Just as how in Kailash you have the Ganas, most importantly led by Ganesha, because you are only doing the mukhastuti to gods, but gods need to hear some unvarnished truth. So you need not just the panegyrists, you need the the zesters, which I think another book called Laughing Traditions or Laughing Matters, Comic Traditions in India. But it's a very good book. As you can see, I have practically a note in every page, I think, because it really talks quite a bit about the philosophical dimension of laughter. So here, this is where I shall end, because I think Professor Nikhil Kumar needs to be heard. When unholy acts are committed in the name of holiness, laughter is needed to expose them. When you become a prisoner of your own liberation theology, this is very critical. When you become a prisoner of your own liberation theology, it is a laughable moment. When you're stuck in unproductive and routine formulas, you need laughter to change your habits. When you think you are indispensable to the world and assume false seriousness, laughter exposes your insignificance. So Bakhtin, or the carnival world, has no patience for all these hierarchies and how important I am. So your ego is just simply bursted, and you sort of prick the balloon, so to speak. It tells you not to take yourself so seriously and points to your limitations and the strength of others. Laughter does not favor any self-appointed saviors. This is very critical. I think the world is, in the other book, Art and Answerability, Bakhtin talks about this hunger to achieve significance in the lives of the others is a kind of an unmediated parasitism. You become parasites. You want them to build a shrine for you. For what? This is a disease. So get over it. That's what it says. So when hierarchically organized world sees itself as the norm, laughter shows the inverted world. Everything in this world is topsy-turvy, right? You turn things upside down. So when morals and ideas are frozen in time and space, laughter melts them to let them flow in the cultural landscape, to pick up other dimensions. The fallen and the downtrodden get their due respect in carnival laughter. Laughter loots precious values that are hidden. When officialdom suffocates, laughter releases the individual. These functions are of paramount importance, to our to sort of rise to higher levels. And therefore, that's why in this chapter, this is from my book, this chapter is called Carnivalization of Consciousness. So carnival is a cure for irrational fear. Today, in America, it's getting even worse, perhaps even in that cancel culture and woke culture is driving me up the wall, because everything is, this sanitized, nonsensical, idiotic. One of the things that I celebrate about Sanatan Dharma is that it is not so, there is murkiness, and I like it. I don't like too sanitized world, because that is a form of disgust, And when I went to a Scandinavian country, Finland and Stockholm, Sweden, I said, God, for an Indian, this is disgustingly clean, I said, it is too, sanitized. So the carnival is a cure for irrational fear. It is not the symptom, and it will be the height of irony to fear the remedy. Carnival is the remedy for all our fears, and but until and unless we get to the unless you get in touch with the truth, the healing cannot happen. Okay, so thank you very much. I think now it's time for Professor Nikhil Kumar to speak.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this. Was wonderful. Mesmerizing, so enriching. The delving deep into the idea of laughter, the physical, the spiritual, the psychological aspects of laughter, and how wonderfully you have brought in Shakespeare, Sri Aurobindo, Tagore, and Dostoevsky, and Bakhtin, and all of them. It was wonderful, exquisite, and thank you so much again. So now I will request Professor Nikhil Kumar Over to you, sir. And I will just mention the topic. His topic is Sri Aurobindo's Poetic Consciousness and Evolutionary Breakthrough. Over to you, sir. Sir, I think you are muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes. Good.
Hello. Are you listening to me?
Yes.
Am
yes.
I audible?
Yes.
Oh. So, madam, your topic was very much interesting.
Thank you.
So now I begin my topic on Shri Aurobindo's poetic consciousness, as Sampriti has just now told you. What Shri Aurobindo discovered and called it supramental is the transcendent divine consciousness. D capital in divine and C capital in consciousness. It is his yogic discovery. Such a yogic discovery is not only the evolutionary breakthrough of the yogic consciousness, which has been going on since time immemorial, but also of the evolutionary phenomenon which is going on in the creation. Sri Aurobindo's ascent to this plane and entry into it could make him know that it is a new beginning. We shall explore the supreme divine on this plane of supramental consciousness in the right direction, since the supramental consciousness is the integral consciousness. The plane of mental consciousness where we are living is the separative principle of the essential divine consciousness. So the evolution which is going on within this creation is from the plane of ignorance towards knowledge. But in the world of supramental consciousness, it is from knowledge to the higher knowledge. Sri Aurobindo could know further that the supramental consciousness can be brought down into the creation itself on all its planes of existence down to the plane of matter, as a result of which all the planes of existence within creation will undergo the supramental transformation. By the supramental transformation, we mean the descent and establishment of the supramental consciousness at the base of all the planes of existence within creation. And further, as a result of this, the divine life will be established. Prior to Sri Aurobindo, the rishis had a glimpse of this transcendent plane of supramental consciousness. They were on the border of mind, they could not cross the border of mind. Therefore, they could not know that the plane of supramental is a new beginning, and its consciousness and power can be brought down within the creation. Since supramental is the transcendent divine consciousness, which will be established into the creation itself, it is an evolutionary breakthrough. It is from this plane of the supramental consciousness that Sri Aurobindo wrote his poetry. But to talk of poetry, all his writings manifest the supramental consciousness, whether it be the prose work like The Life Divine, the Synthesis of Yoga, Letters on Yoga, etc. But here we shall concentrate on his poetry, especially his epic Savitri. I would like to say again that Sri Aurobindo wrote Savitri from the plane of the supramental consciousness. This truth is manifest for so many reasons. Savitri is the first literary document of the world which reveals the pre-creation state of existence. The opening canto of Savitri, the symbol dawn, reveals the pre-creation state of existence. The very first line of this opening canto, it was the hour before the gods awake, very categorically manifests the supramental consciousness. Because this very first line begins to reveal the pre-creation state of existence. Let us try to penetrate into this first line. It was the hour before the gods awake. There is one God, the one divine, and the gods. Gods are the emanations, formations of the one divine, the supreme reality. And all the emanations are charged with a particular function. And these emanations, which we call gods, are the chief cosmic functionaries. When Sri Aurobindo writes, before the gods awake, it means the cosmic functions or the cosmic functionaries are in the suspended state. And because there is no cosmic function, there is no creation, it is the pre-creation state of existence. The scholars of Sri Aurobindo, such as a well-known scholar, Shri M.P. Pandit has written on the basis of his associations with the mother and Shri Aurobindo that up till now 6 creations have taken place and they have undergone dissolution. Or rather, we can say that 6 cycles of creations have taken place and they all have undergone dissolution, pralaya. And the present one in which we are living is the 7th one. And after the dissolution of the last creation and before the beginning of this present creation, there is a gap, there is an interval, and this gap and this interval is the pre-creation state of existence. So, therefore, Sri Aurobindo writes that it was the hour before the gods awake. So, this is very clearly a pre-creation state of existence. Here, I would like to speak of an incident in this connection which took place with me in Delhi University. I was telling the same thing there, but a very senior professor rejected my thesis
Seminar. I can't talk to you.
that such a pre-creation state of existence is a revelation or has been witnessed by Sri Aurobindo on the ground that poets are imaginative. It is an imagination. But I must tell here that imagination being a product of mind and the mind being a product of evolution or creation is not capable of transcending the plane of creation and visualizing this pre-creation state of existence. So the very fact that Sri Aurobindo visualizes the pre-creation state of existence, which he records in his epic Savitri, is the categorical manifestation of the supramental consciousness in his being. All the other lines, just as across the path of the divine event, the huge foreboding mind of night, alone in her unlit temple of eternity, lay stretched immobile upon silence Mars, is capital. Due to the paucity of time, it is not possible to go into the depth of all the lines. But the conclusion is this, that Sri Aurobindo could witness the pre-creation state of existence, and whatever he has portrayed is in fact his clear vision of the pre-creation state of existence. This is the first reason that we can say or we can conclude that Sri Aurobindo manifests the supramental consciousness. When he says that in the pre-creation state of existence, a fathomless zero occupied the world. So an imaginative mind is not constitutionally capable of speaking of it, of this fathomless zero. Only that consciousness which exists beyond the plane of creation can visualize it, can witness it. So this is the first evidence that Sri Aurobindo is the embodiment of the supramental consciousness. Further, I would like to say again, and you also know very well, that Sri Aurobindo has stated that the transcendent supramental divine consciousness can be brought down within this creation. And for this, he evolved a yoga, which is the yoga of the supramentalization. And this yoga of supramentalization is not found anywhere in the ancient works of India. I'm talking only of India because India is the authority in the realm of yoga spirituality. Vedas, Upanishads, and the Gita have been found to be the highest literary documents which have been written from the summit of spiritual consciousness. But because all these works were written from the plane of the summit of the spiritual mind consciousness, the very truth which Sri Aurobindo discovered, that supramental consciousness can be brought down within the creation, evaded their vision, and they could not develop the yoga of supramentalization. Sri Aurobindo evolved the yoga of supramentalization, and in his epic Savitri, Savitri's yoga is the yoga of supramentalization. In the book of Yoga of Savitri, there are some cantos on her yoga. One of the cantos is parable of the search for the soul, and the other one is the entry into the inner countries. In these cantos, she is commanded by the divine voice to discover her heaven-born soul. So the very yoga of discovering the heaven-born soul is the beginning of the yoga of supramentalization. Sri Aurobindo has stated that we are made up of body, life, and mind, and the divine self is at the center. Body, life, and mind are the instruments of the divine self, And the divine self exists within us in its two poises. The central being is what he terms Jivatma, and the other is the psychic being. The psychic being is a spark of the Jivatma. It is a representative of the Jivatma, or a projection of the Jivatma, we may say. So psychic being takes part in the evolution. And in the spiritual evolution, or by undertaking up the yoga of spiritual transformation, it is the psychic being which evolves. The divine intensity enveloped within this spark of the divine develops. And this is the evolutionary soul. And the heaven-born soul, which we witness in Savitri's yoga, is Jivatma. As we evolve to the planes of spiritual consciousness, the gap between the psychic being and Jivatma decreases. But so long as we are on the plane of mind, even on the summit of spiritual mind, the gap or the interval between the psychic being and Jivatma remains. It is in the yoga of supramentalization that this gap disappears. That is to say, the psychic being goes to be one with Jivatma, which is its origin. Savitri is commanded to discover her heaven-born soul. Earlier, when she was commanded to arise and vanquish time and death, that is to say, the divisive principle of existence, she is reluctant. And this reluctance was due to the fact that a psychic being could not go to be one with the Jivatma. When, as a result of the command of a divine voice which she received from the above, she discovered her heaven-born soul, that is the Jivatma. The very consciousness of Jivatma, which is in fact the individual poise of the transcendent supramental consciousness in man, could percolate into her being, and her psychic being could be one with the Jivatma. And she underwent a celestial change, a celestial transformation. The supramental consciousness descended into her being, and eventually on the universe, into the universal counterparts of all the planes of creations which are within the individual being of Savitri. So the very description of Savitri's yoga, the yoga of supramentalization, is another categorical manifestation of the supramental consciousness which embodied or which took the position of Sri Aurobindo. In the second canto of Savitri, when we go to the last line, we have a line, this was the day when Satyavan must die. Let us note why Sri Aurobindo says Satyavan must die. Satyavan's death is a necessity. It is an evolutionary necessity. Because unless Satyavan dies, the creation cannot be supramentally transformed. This is clear when we enter into the other cantos of the epic Savitri, such as the kingdom of subtle matter, the kingdom and godhead of little life, greater mind, etc. I will refer to the kingdom of subtle matter. Sri Aurobindo says that subtle matter or the plane of subtle matter is the origin of the world of gross matter in which we are living. And whatever happens in our gross body or on this plane of gross matter precedes on the plane of subtle matter. So to bring about any evolutionary change, it is a must that the plane of subtle matter must undergo evolutionary change first. Only as a result of the evolutionary change of the plane of subtle matter, the evolutionary transformation can take place on the plane of subtle matter. In one of his letters on Yoga, Sri Aurobindo says that there exists a subtle body in us. In the event of our death, the death of the gross body, the soul goes out of this gross matter, sitting in the subtle body. And this first station of the subtle body where it stops is the plane of subtle matter. So when Satyavan dies, his soul, his psychic being, goes to in the subtle body, goes to the plane of subtle matter. But since Savitri has already brought down a supramental transformation of the plane of subtle matter, the supramental consciousness will descend into the subtle body of Satyavan. Sri Aurobindo has made it clear that Satyavan is the representative of matter. Representative of matter means he is evolved enough to receive the supramental consciousness into it. So when his subtle bodies after his death goes to the plane of subtle matter, it will receive the supramental consciousness and will undergo the supramental transformation. And in the event of his resuscitation, when he comes back to the earth and comes back into his life, his gross body will undergo a supramental transformation due to the very fact, as I have stated you, that his subtle body has undergone supramental change. Therefore, his death is a must. So, all these descriptions, all these truths come into the poetic consciousness of Sri Aurobindo, which is certainly a matter of evolutionary breakthrough. It is not only the evolutionary breakthrough of the poetic consciousness itself, but it is the evolutionary breakthrough which is taking place in the earth itself. That's all. This is what I have discovered here. Thank you very much. If you have any question, you can please.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful, engaging, enriching, and enlightening speech on Aurobindo consciousness. Uh, we have been enriched by your words. And if anyone has any question, you can ask. If not, we can turn it over to Kanchanda.
Well,
If you want
Sampriti,
to.
you could ask a
say,
question.
uh,
You can ask a question.
I don't have any questions as of now.
Oh, really? Okay.
I will work on it. I will, as this meeting is being recorded, I will listen to it again in future.
You can contact me later on also if you have any question in future.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. I will definitely, I will.
We can't hear you, Kanchan. Kanchan, unmute yourself.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, finally, good.
Madam, I have been told by Sampriti to say something, but I want to tell madam that I'm not a speaker. I'm an obedient and placid hearer and listener, ma'am. But I want to tell something that someone asking me, why we want to do seminars like this. Do you have any necessity? So I told them, obviously, we are being enriched and enlightened philosophically, psychologically, and intellectually. So that's why Sampriti told me, being the organizer and convener, to tell something. I want to tell Sampriti that I have a supa of cacoethes scribendi, but never cacoethes lutendi. Means I don't feel the urge to say something, but I want to listen. And that's why I resolved that it would be audacity to tell something before Lakshmi Bandlamudi ma'am and Professor Nikhil Kumar. And I resolved to maintain a kind of scintillating silence, ma'am. That's why, but I have written something, though I didn't have time to contemplate. But what I feel, ma'am, I don't know, all the times I identify myself with William Wordsworth Lucy and his Lucy poem I always recite, and I identify myself that like that. She dwelt among the untrodden ways beside the springs of growth, a maid whom there were none to praise and very few to love. We know that the experts say that it is an Elizabeth, but I think that in this poem, Wordsworth, Lucy symbolizes human self. I don't know why. I think so, ma'am. And you must have read Shesher Kavita, novel by Rabindranath Tagore. There is a character. One is Amit and another heroine is Lavanya. And if you read the novel, you can find William Radice and another translator had translated it into English. Radice's translation is very good, madam. You can read. There is a character Lavanya. I think that in this novel, Tagore has given us an example what should be the psychic being of a human being.
Mm.
Lavanya's sweetness, beauty, placidity, and sense of morality, her ethics, everything resemble human psyche. One psyche should be like that. And I think that Lavanya is nothing but symbolization, or sometimes I speak manifestation of human psyche.
Mm.
And mother, and I want to say that mother and Sri Aurobindo are mainstay of my existence. Whenever and when I'm sick, I'm ill, I suffer. Sri Aurobindo's Life Divine and Mother's Prayers and Meditations. It was written in French by Mother, but some of the prayers were translated by Sri Aurobindo himself. And afterwards, Nolini Kantu Gupta translated into beautiful English. Then prayers and meditations and Life Divine gives me energy. And when depression, frustration, and degringolates and downward and declivitous attitude, propensity envelop me, prayers and meditations gives me light, enlightens me. And in the year 2019, I had a long spell of depression. I don't know. Even my wife said that I refused to go to office. One type of fear was enveloping me. But ultimately, some writings, Sri Aurobindo and Mother's prayers and meditation gave me tremendous energy. And now when I go to office, I get energy from them. And that's why, ma'am, I want to say that I want to end that Sri Aurobindo's profoundly meaningful explanation and conceptualization of evolution of consciousness and Mother's extraordinarily complete explanation of the human psychology, these two things changed my life and changed my thinking. That means, madam, I was not a Marxist or post-Marxist or Derridian type of post-modernist. Never. And I am also not an argumentative Indian, madam. Professor Amartya Sen said that prolixity and loquaciousness, these two qualities, actually, democracy depends upon these two powers, prolixity and loquaciousness. But madam, I'm not never an argumentative, neither a Marxist or post-Marxist or Derridian type of postmodernist. But madam, what happened that I want to end by read it. Now, Rabindranath once said that now we have the epidemic of avatars. Epidemic of avatars. You will find everywhere, madam, all those avatars and something like new culture, spiritual culture, but I don't know how much spiritual or they are. But this is very interesting. Sri Aurobindo and Mother, that they did, that was the gift of fire with which humanity began its ascent into self-consciousness, today burns no more in human hands, but fuels huge impersonal circulation of capital, to which humanity remains imprisoned. Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga represent in this situation is no less than the second birth of consciousness. Conscious evolution, second birth of conscious evolution, the primal tool for the emergence of the infinite of plural subject out of its subjection to the threading and pulverizing of attention and quality that marks our time. So therefore, madam, as you were saying that you were defining carnival, it was wonderful. When you were in Scandinavian countries like Sweden, Stockholm, so much sanitized, but being an Indian,
Disgusting.
So madam, I over to Sampriti and she will recite a prayer from Mother's prayer meditation and we will end.
Just
Sampriti,
one comment before I hand it over to Sampriti. You know, when you talk, Kanchan, about just being a listener, you don't have any questions. It reminds me of the introduction in this book, Light and Laughter by Amal Kiran and Nirodha. So because when he introduces, he said, you know, Nirodha is always saying, oh, I'm very shy, I cannot talk. That is one of the traits of very highly evolved people. They feign this kind of ignorance, in a joking way. All right, Sampriti, you have a question, or you are willing to?
Yes, ma'am, I had an observation. I was just wondering that, you know, in our generation, I think there are two kinds of laughter. One is a real laughter and one is the unreal, which, you know, in the social media and all, we see the unreal laughter, which is flaunted, but it's not real. And in real, we are like most of the time, me and I have observed my friends, we are mostly melancholic and we don't laugh so much. Maybe when we meet or we share a joke or something, we laugh, but most of the time we are very stressed, and even though sometimes we know that the laughter and the happiness that is shown in the social media platform, they are not really real, but still we get affected by that. And yeah, that I just wanted to share that take.
Your observation is very much on the dot, and it is not just simply your own individual experience. This is something that is very collective. When we stray so far away from truth, then our ability to laugh, you know, when you even listen to Beethoven, you know, in his Ode to Joy, you, in order to be able to laugh, you must be able to cry too. You know, when the range of emotions are very, very narrow, then our ability to get again, like when I teach psychological disorders and other topics, I tell the students when we get to depression, melancholy is a very human thing, but people don't want to touch it, and so you fake it because you don't want to kind of feel the sorrow. And I say, for me, as an Indian, I'll tell my students that I just listen to some sad songs, Dukhi Man Mere, Sun Mera Kehna, that kind of song allows me to kind of, it becomes cathartic, so even when I play in the Western world with my American friends, like जब दिल ही टूट गया हम जी के क्या करेंगे, that kind of Saigal song, they're like, oh my God, this is what suicidal ideation. I said, cut it out. This is not suicidal ideation. It is just reality. It is poetic melancholy. Yeah? So see, these things have to be brought back in the universities. That's why I think Kanchan very clearly said, hi, none of all these Derridian, not that I actually took a class with Derrida because I'm in New York and he was teaching it. But the problem is there is this hyper theorization and very little experience. And so when aesthetics is subordinated to politics, exactly what you're talking about, Sampriti, happens. Why is it that even today when we read, Tagore or other great literary writers, that we feel a certain burst of energy, even if there is death and all the other horrible, tragedies of life, because we get in fact, I would say, I am not, this is very personal, I'm not comfortable, this is very Western world, there will be death and you'll say, let's celebrate life. What rubbish that it is, the life has ended and you should there must be bereavement time. And instead you say, and so the funeral doesn't feel like a funeral, it's some horrific. These are all kind of masks that we wear. And then it takes expression in this very pathological manner. So we are not able to heal, so I think what you say is, this is social media and literature is supposed to bring us closer to truth and to the human emotions. As a psychologist, I relied on literary theory because it's supposed to, but literature itself has failed, and we need to read old classic literature, get back to that. I mean, because that's where, so your observation is very much on the dot. You're really catching up, hitting on a kind of an emotional pandemic that we are living in. It's very, very global. Anybody else? Because I don't leave a classroom without students asking questions, How about you, Himadri and Preetham? Do you have any questions or observations? Unmute yourself, Himadri. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, madam. Thank you very much for your very enlightening talk, and Professor Mikhail also. So no questions as such, but just I think I can just put in a few words about what you were just mentioning, and also Ms. Sampriti. So yeah, about this emotions and what you were saying, I was also wondering that maybe somehow nowadays, especially I think so-called the young generation, especially, I think they're also very much motivated and carried away by what they see in the various movies or whatever, like Sampriti was also saying, social media. So maybe we are influenced by what we see or what we are shown. So that is also one reason maybe why we are not able to manage our emotions. So very rightly you were, ma'am, pointing out that it's very important to go back to the classics and the core, the real emotion somehow we are missing, and we are rather thinking and crying or laughing in terms of the things which are catered to us. So as if we are crying as we are shown in the movies or in the ads. So somehow I think there is a gap, and the real, I think, I mean, if a person is feeling like crying, so I think she should cry, and it's better to release the emotions and then rather put it in some hidden corner, and sometimes it suddenly comes out like an outburst. So
No, this is
that is
actually
something.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I'm glad
Mhm.
you're raising these, observations, because I think it is one of the diseases of this modern time where we are creating fake reality. That's why I very passionately feel that we need to, we cannot stray far away from truth. Laughter is a close companion of truth. And so when the satire is not stinging, and when you're not able to kind of take the hit, then we are also moving very far from exactly like what Kshemendra says, that sanctimoniousness takes over. Real sanctity is gone, it is. So you're absolutely right. That's why I feel very passionately about this topic of laughter. Even, Himadri, in the Western world also, that is the other pathos, I think, Professor Nikhil Kumar, you can add as a literature professor. What is happening is everything has become so politicized. You're not framing anything within the human avastha. The human condition is lost. And when the human condition is lost, then we don't know how to be a human being. That's why Dostoevsky famously said when he wrote The Idiot, I want to find the man in man. Where is the man in man now? Nikal hai, it's gone. And that is where I think literature and literary writing and literary theory have failed us immensely. It's a complete waste. That is the crisis of today's world, I think. And I think you in all your future academic works, you need to keep this in mind. Don't take everything that the universities throw at you. They also throw poison at you. You have to find your own sort of voice. And that is where if I had waited for institutions to change, I would have never done a dissertation on Mahabharata. In New York, it would have been an impossible. I mean, that way, I think what Amartya Sen says is right. You fight your lonely battles and pay the price and still do what you need to do. So that is very critical. And that's why I wanted you guys to ask questions. What about who is this Preetham? She or he? They're hiding somewhere. Any other observations? Tell us about yourself, Himadri. What are you? What level are you in? What are you doing?
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, I was a student in Vishwabharati in English department. So I passed out in 2016. At present, I am staying in my hometown, Jharkhand. So
Okay.
in Dumka, yeah. So I am teaching here in St. Xavier's College, and
You finished your PhD in Vishwabharati?
no, PhD is going on. So almost in the last part, you can say, yeah. So
Very good. Good luck. What are you working on?
I got the topic. I mean, I used the word God because actually I was not interested in the very beginning. So, but somehow, anyway, but now I'm liking it very much. So, Chitra Banerjee, diaspora and women's writing narrative, something like this.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay.
Actually, just I'd like to add one thing. I mean, I was very close to Professor Gautam Ghoshal when I was in Vishwabharati. So, I was supposed to pursue my MPhil under his guidance and he suggested me to work on the future poetry. Then actually, I got a call from here in St. Xavier, so unfortunately, I had to drop the MPhil, and that's something I regret still. But still, sometime in the future, I think work deeper into these areas.
Well, in my humble opinion, Himadri, I think go for the classics. None of all these diaspora.
Yeah, actually, I am more
Problem with
interested
these
in that.
diaspora. They just don't have a diaspora should lead to a more creative and dialogic understanding of the world around you and the history. And these people get into this alterity and so I have a problem with that. So I'm not trying to discourage you, Himadri, but
no, actually, personally speaking, I'm also not very interested, but somehow,
yeah, it's not
kind of.
worth a PhD on, So since I'm a Mahabharata person, I find the Vyasa's creation of Draupadi and Gandhari and Kunti to be far more exciting than what these modern
Yeah, actually, very right, madam. That is more real, more authentic, the real ones. Because so the so-called reworkings are not very satisfying. I mean, Chitra Banerjee
No.
herself
In
is
fact, I think it's
presenting
a
the
waste of
reworkings.
time, Himadri. Trust me.
Yeah. And all these authors like Amish and this Devdutt Patnaik, I'm not very comfortable with these reworkings. Okay, it's good that they are presenting the story in a lucid manner, but somehow,
Yeah.
not very nice, I'd say.
Even I didn't like that Yajnavalka by Pratibha
Yeah.
Patnaik. Right? But
And
not
I feel that it is more of
Tare.
becoming, what I feel that I think is becoming more like a fashion that every modern author is trying to rework the myths,
See,
not
I
really
think
respecting, but
relevant to our topic, their sense of temporality is really, really very Hegelian kind of a linearity, that it is a break from the past. This is not a break from the past at all. Chronotopes, multiple chronotopes coexist. When you read Tagore or when you read even Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay, they are able to weave that multiple chronotopes. That is what gives that kind of a dynamic thrust, which none of these I rejected papers when I convened Bakhtin conference in 2013, and people were presenting, whether it was Pratibha Ray or even Shashi Tharoor. I said, thank you. I have no interest in getting into these papers at all. So that would be my honest. Anyway, thank you for sharing your, it gave me the opportunity. Yeah.
thank you.
Is Preetham, do you have a question? Okay, looks like. Back to you, Sampriti.
Yes, ma'am. So before concluding this session, I would just share another observation, that is
Sure.
Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay. I feel personally that these classic authors are kind of forgotten. I mean, our generation, not many people are working on these authors, and Vibhuti Bhushan has written a very a wonderful, exciting novel which is called Devjan. And there he discusses different planes of existence where a person dies and he is still there, but nobody can see him, and he can see his loved ones and how they are changing, how they are reacting to his death. And it's exciting. I don't know if there is no translation available. I don't know why such a great novel is not yet translated. I would love to translate that one day in English. Yeah, and not much research has also been put into there. So that's
Someday,
really unfortunate.
Sampriti, someday, when you read the history of novels in Bakhtin's classifications of novels through the time and space chronotope, you should communicate to me as to where you would locate Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay. Based on Pater Panchali and Apu Sansar and that, I see that as a kind of he records the individual ascent.
Absolutely.
But it is not a socio-historical kind of a novel. The surrounding world remains static, but the individual grows. When Apu takes the globe and so
Yes.
that's I would love to hear those sorts of interpretations. In the kind of a history. So whereas Tagore or even Bhairappa, they are much more polychronotopic. Than Vibhuti Bhushan. But it could vary from novel to novel. So I haven't read the book that you are mentioning, which I think I have an inkling as to what you're talking about. I think I must have read some references to that. So it's a very, it'll be lovely to take up such projects.
Yes, yes, I would love to have this discussion further.
That would be lovely.
So I think we can conclude this session. Before that, I would like to recite a prayer, and then we can conclude. My aspiration to thee, O Lord, has taken the form of a beautiful rose, harmonious, full in bloom, rich in fragrance. I stretch it out to thee with both arms in a gesture of offering, and I ask of thee, if my understanding is limited, widen it. If my knowledge is obscure, enlighten it. If my heart is empty of ardor, set it aflame. If my love is insignificant, make it intense. If my feelings are ignorant and egotistic, give them the full consciousness in the truth. And the I, which demands this of thee, O Lord, is not a little personality lost amidst thousands of others. It is the whole art that aspires to thee in a movement full of fervor. In the perfect silence of my contemplation, all widens to infinity. And in the perfect peace of that silence, thou appearest in the resplendent glory of thy light. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
everyone.
It was a delightful to kind of engage with all of you, each and every one of you. Thank you, Professor Nikhil Kumar and Himadri, Preetham. I can't see who you are, but Kanchan and of course Sampriti. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I'll stop recording.